Don't fall asleep on me yet. We got one more session to go. Then we can get to the free beer. I'm sure there's free beer, right?
There was already free beer.
Somewhere, right? There's always free beer at the end of the day. Yeah, so there's like 14 sessions going on. So thanks for coming to this one. You'll be happy to know you picked the right one. All the other ones were completely lame. This was the best one to come to. Nice. So how many people here have heard of brackets before? Oh, awesome. I'm preaching to the choir. Well, maybe I'll teach you guys a couple new things. How many people here have contributed to brackets? Aha, all right. We're going to change that today. Use brackets, but not. Oh, how many people are using brackets? Oh, that's. Ah, okay. All right, all right. I'm going to get some contributors here. That's my whole point today. So, all right. So you guys are here to hear a little bit about brackets. So first off, who am I? My name's Adam. I'm a lead product manager at Adobe. I've been leading the brackets project for quite a while. You can follow me on Twitter. I'd appreciate it. I don't even have a Twitter link up there. So, oh yeah, there it is. It's pretty cool. If you like comic books and video games and web stuff, then I'm your man. But all that aside, let's talk about brackets. So when we talk about brackets, there's actually two different things that we're talking about. There's the open source project, which is probably going to be most of my focus today. But then there's also the actual product brackets. So the open source project is really what is at the core, and it's really what we're all about here. And brackets as a project is meant to be a sandbox where people can just experiment with crazy new ideas in web tooling. We started the project about 18 months ago. I think we got it open source last May of 2012, so it hasn't been out that long. And the idea was basically we felt tooling on the web wasn't as good as it should be. It actually seemed to be sliding backwards. You know, we started using Vim a lot more. I started using like Notepad and things that had nothing to do with the web. And we're just like, well, okay. And so as we're seeing that trend going, we started getting worried, right? We're not really innovating in this tooling, and we're professional web developers. We deserve something that cares specifically about us. So we started kind of playing around and hacking some ideas, and I'm going to show you guys some of them before, and we just started doing it in HTML and just seeing if we could get it done. And we realized, you know what, we have some ideas at Adobe, but there's probably tons and tons of great ideas out there. And so why don't we just sort of create this environment where people can just hack on it, see, and come up with the next great idea. And so that's really what the project is all about, and I'll talk a little bit more about like how we do that. But then there's also brackets, the code editor, right, which is actually the sort of the product that comes out of this project. You know, and every couple weeks we put up a new build, and this is actually the result of sort of all that hard work. Now, the code editor itself, we are trying to be a little bit different. We're not just trying to make a clone of every other text editor you've seen out there. We wanted to do something special. So we have a couple key sort of design philosophies that we've adhered to. So brackets is most definitely on the side of the text editor side of the house, not on the big IDE side of the house. We wanted something that was very clean and simple, something that was just you and your code, but at the same time we wanted to get some of that really cool functionality that IDEs have and sort of slowly bring it in there. And so brackets, the whole idea is that it's just you and your code, but when you need the help and you want that extra support, it kind of just sort of unravels. And so it's very simple like a text editor, but you'll find some of the features are as deep as any IDE that's out there. We also are trying to be different. And I know that sounds very cliche, but the whole point is that we wanted to push tooling forward. We wanted to try new things. And so we sometimes go completely out of our way just to try something new. And if it doesn't work, okay, we'll get rid of it. Sometimes it works and we iterate and we can make it better and better. And so we actually kind of think about, all right, rather than just implementing a feature like in the other editor, let's see if we can think about it in a different light and just see if it even makes sense. And so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's kind of one of our sort of driving principles. The other thing is that we completely play favorites. Like, we are focused on web design and development, right? These other guys that are out there are just generic text editors. They don't care about HTML and how it relates to CSS and JavaScript. All they care about is text, 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 text. We care specifically about the web technologies, open web standards, and then sort of the technologies that grow on top of that. So we wanted to do something very special for web designers and web developers. And as a result of that focus, we can build some cool things. And hopefully you'll sort of agree. So let me show you brackets really quickly for those of you guys haven't seen it. So yes, I am running Windows, believe it or not. I mentioned before I was a gamer, so it just kind of comes with the territory. So this is brackets. It's a simple code editor. You know, we try again to keep this UI as simple as possible. If I want to actually even get rid of that, it can just be me and my code and it's just the file menus. But one of the things that we do differently is you'll notice there's no giant tabs across the top. One of the things we wanted to think about is when I'm starting to work in web development, I'm usually working on a core set of HTML that has a related JavaScript file, related CSS. And it's something that we kind of call a working set. It's like this little piece of code that I'm working on, and it's interrelated by these documents. And so what we did is we have this idea of like working files. And so I can actually browse some of this stuff. Oh, I shouldn't do that while I have this.
The left side of your screen is cut off.
Oh, okay, I see. So it's just a file tree. You're not missing much. And now I'm going to have to go close this guy down. I'm giving away the next part of my talk here, but it's all right. So I've loaded this. I'm actually working on this project right here. So it's a simple text editor, but rather than basically have a bunch of tabs across the screen, anytime you edit a file, it gets basically added to your working set. And I can actually switch folders around here. There's no sort of notion of a project. It's just a folder. It's where your code is sitting. And we can sort of take it from there. But that's just one of those small little things that we're kind of doing different. Now, one of the big experiments that we started playing around with was around something that we call live development. So if I come down here and kind of find this part of my code. I've been a web developer since about 1996, 1997, and I've gotten really used to writing some code in my browser, or my editor, hitting save, going to the browser, hitting reload, seeing what it looks like, back and forth. And it's called like the save reload dance. And I've been doing it for so long that I kind of just forgot that that's kind of ridiculous that we do this, right? Like, why can't it just be a lot easier than that? And so some people have taken a stab and said, oh, well, every time you save, we'll refresh the browser for you. And that's good. It's a step in the right direction. But it also means, like, if I'm working on a one-pager app or I've got some sort of state in the app, maybe I've logged in, it blows all of that sort of stuff away. And it makes it really sort of frustrating to have to go and hit save, reload, log in, get back to that part of my application. And so what we wanted to do is see if we could just push changes as you're writing HTML and CSS directly to the browser without having to actually refresh the browser. And this is what we call live development. So you notice I've got this icon up here. When I actually launched this, it basically made a connection between Chrome that's running on my desktop and the brackets editor itself. Now, there's no extension installed here. This isn't some special build of Chrome. This is like the same version of Chrome that you install like on your parents' computer. It's exactly like what it's going to look like for your users too, and that's important as well. We want to make sure that the preview is exactly what your users are going to see. So we create this connection, and then we have this communication back and forth. So I can start doing things like, maybe I want to go ahead and add an image tag here. So I'll go ahead and add an image, and SRC equals, we'll go assets, we'll call this one, boom. And the second, right now you'll notice that there's this little pink thing on the left, hopefully it's not being cut off. It's basically saying, hey, live preview isn't really updating right now because your HTML is kind of crap. You didn't fix it, it's got some errors. But the second I go ahead and close this guy, it's not going to update. Why am I not updating? Why is it wrong? What did I do wrong? Oh, I think I was on the wrong page. Sorry about that. Okay, so now it's working. So if I start moving this guy around, you can actually see. So I'm just going to move this line around. And you can actually see it's updating in real time based on the position, right? So every little change I make gets kind of pushed out there. If I want to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and add a class to this guy, maybe go call it an alt text, it's going to go and update that right away. So the HTML sort of as I type is being updated, and I can do all sorts of things like live development is awesome. And all my changes are being updated. So if you're sort of just even updating HTML and content-wise, it's a really nice way to preview that without having to sort of go through that big process. Now, the other thing is that we can also push CSS changes that are live. So if I want to sort of like design in the browser and change how things look, I can actually see a result of those as well. Now, there's a little flicker here because of reveal and how it's rendering stuff, but normally you kind of get the idea. So I can change colors, any sort of things that I want to apply here, like maybe I'll add a text shadow, like this guy black, and I can kind of get a sense of exactly what the design looks like sort of as I'm coding. I think I can even change the size here, or maybe make this like 4 EMs. No, that's way too big. Just come down to like 1.5. You kind of get the idea. So everything's happening, pushing it to the browser, and we're not actually having to reload, which is super cool because I'm maintaining all my states. So I'm going to make all that sort of stuff go away, go back over to my. Today, it's Chrome only. So we started by basically talking to some external APIs that Chrome had available, but we do have in the works to actually bring this across all browsers and not make it locked into Chrome. But for right now, it's Chrome only. So that's live development. So the other thing that we were looking at is really trying to exploit the idea that we know how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are interrelated. It's that whole thing about playing favorites, right? So when I'm editing something here, like this HTML is obviously related to a bunch of CSS that I had open in the other window, and I could actually go and mess around with it. Now, if I actually hit Command-E on any HTML tag, what we do is we actually go out and we find all the CSS rules that apply to this H2. So you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff coming from Reveal and a whole bunch of stuff that I've written. And I can actually get right back to that same one and start editing it again. So maybe I'll go ahead again, change it to my favorite color. Kind of get the idea. Oh, I'm not in the right slide. So I can actually then start to put all these sort of things together. So, you know, changing the color again. Boom. Except now, when I'm done, I go back to work. And it's this idea of sort of diving in and out of your code, not having to worry about how everything's mapped across all of your different documents. We can kind of help out with that. Depending on where you hit Command-E, and Command-E is sort of our magic key. You should try pushing it all over the place. It does cool stuff. You can actually, we get a little bit more focus. So here on the H2 tag, it's saying, all right, let me go out and find all these rules. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of rules, and I can use the keyboard to kind of find the right one. If I actually do it right on the class itself, it'll go directly to that class, because I'm being a little bit more specific about what I want. Now the cool thing about these editors is they're not getting in the way of my code, right? So you'll notice like my code starts at line 113 and then it has the inline editor and jumps down to 114. None of your code is ever being hidden here, and that's one of those things that I've even built products in the past that would have popped up a window here or would have had some sort of panel that got in your way, and it's not cool, right? It just should be you and your code. And now these things become sort of part of also a living document or a working document. Like I can move this around and it's still going to stay open. I can go ahead and open this other one down here. Actually, I'll go pull this guy up. He won't be as big. And I can leave these sort of things open as I'm working on that task or as I'm sort of tweaking these things. Now we've extended this not just with CSS, we've also extended it down into JavaScript. So I've got some JavaScript down here. Maybe I want to go and figure out where this function is coming from and I want to edit it real quick. If I hit it there, it'll go out and find that function. I can use it to basically even just see the parameters it takes. Maybe I could drop a console statement in here, or I can actually edit the function itself. But again, these sort of things sort of get all, basically become sort of that thing that I'm working on. You make them go away by hitting escape on the inside, or you can hit escape outside, and then they all go away. So you get right back to work. And it's this idea that you should be sort of diving in and out of code rather than having to manage a bunch of documents. Now, I'm actually pulling for master right now, and this isn't as part of the build you can get today, but one of the new things that we've added is the ability to actually create new rules from here too. So say I just wrote H2 class alt and it didn't actually exist. If I go ahead and create this new rule, it'll actually ask me what file I want to put it in and go ahead and create it for me. I'm going to go put it in the PDF one, I don't know why. But it basically allows you to sort of do this sort of thing. It's not just about editing, it's also about creating as well. So I'll go back here. So that's cool. Quick editors are interesting, especially as far as getting into code, but we wanted to see how far we could go with that concept. Actually, let me get rid of this PDF guy. Get out of here. No. So if I flip back over to my CSS, there's some other things that I could do. Like maybe we could put visual tools into here. So if I hit Command-E on the color hot pink, I'm actually going to get a visual color editor to actually start to help me out. And of course, this is all still tied to the live development, so I can actually really start to design. But I don't have to design thinking in like 389093. I can do it with the same sort of tools I would have had if I was coming into something from like Photoshop or Fireworks, like the same sort of visual design tools. So pretty cool. And this is just kind of like one of those ideas that we can pop in there. Another thing that's coming in the next build is something called a cubic Bezier editor. Is anybody familiar with cubic Beziers? Is there any cubic Bezier experts here? Okay, I am so not one. I don't even barely know what it is, but luckily there's a couple things that I can work on here. So if I want to go ahead and add a transition timing function, and I am horrible with CSS animation, so I don't really even know what this does. I'm going to actually hit Control K. And what Control K does is it actually now shows me inline documentation. So based on being on the transition timing function, we use the web platform docs to actually pull in basically open community-powered documentation that tells me, okay, this is something to do with animation, it sets the pace of action. I can actually use a cubic Bezier. I'll drop this guy in and give it some default values. And then from there, I'm going to actually go ahead and hit Command-E again. And now I'm actually going to get a visual editor to actually change that. As I start to play around with this guy, I can actually build this editor. And of course, like, I never would have known like 0.7122, but I can get a sort of idea here on like what that editor is supposed to look like. And so, again, it's that sort of idea that it looks like a simple text editor at the very high level, but when you need that sort of functionality, it sort of bubbles up. And so you should get in the habit of trying Command E whenever you get stuck and see what happens. So let me get back this guy. So those are just some of our inline editors. I talked a little bit about the quick docs. How many people here are familiar with the Web Platform Docs project? A few people? So I'm sure you guys have done this before. Like, you've gone and searched for some CSS property or some HTML attribute, and the top result is usually the W3 schools. You go there, the information's not so great, you get like 20 ads in your face. Not so cool. And so one of the things that we've been working on in partnership with the W3C and Microsoft and Google and Mozilla is basically just having a central source where we can document the web and have like first-class documentation available. So actually, if I go out here and go to docs.webplatform.org, it's basically a media wiki that anybody can edit that actually has all the sort of documentation we're looking for. So that's the documentation we're pulling in line here. If you find like a spelling typo or you want to add more documentation, you can go ahead and do that yourself. The nice thing is you can even get to it directly from within brackets itself. So if I go ahead and click read more, I can actually find out a lot more information. Now you notice we only show you the sort of information we think you probably want at development time, and we try to keep it like sort of low key, but there's a lot more stuff out here like examples, usage patterns, like compatibility charts, and apparently if you hit F1 you get Windows help. But you kind of get the idea. And so again, this whole thing is just a wiki. Anybody can edit it. There's a big old edit button there. You might be able to fix this image thing that's going on over here. So, again, get involved. So let's get back over to here. So those are quick docs. Those are a couple of our ideas that have to do with how we sort of manage inline editors. And we think there's probably a lot more that you could do with inline editors. These are just some sort of examples. Another thing we've started playing around with is this idea around sort of quick views. Like, and this is sort of a mouse-driven interaction where if I start to highlight stuff here, we can actually give you sort of the visual representation of what some of this code is, especially even for things like a gradient. And I don't know how well that's going to show up, but it kind of gives me a preview of what the gradient's going to look like. It gives me previews of these colors. And if I go back over to my HTML, it even gives me previews of the images with actually the height and the width, stuff that you might need as sort of your coding. But it's sort of this idea that you can sort of inspect your code as you're sort of going around with it, but it doesn't come up as you're typing, because that would be super annoying. So these are just some of the things we've built. This isn't really about a feature demo and showing you how awesome brackets is. This is more about just like, these are some crazy ideas. We threw them in there. So maybe some are good, maybe some are bad. But the point is that anybody can build this stuff, and it's really no fun to innovate alone, and so we kind of want you guys to come along. So we really wanted to set out by making brackets from a hacking and from a contributing perspective as easy as possible. Really, really approachable. How many people are contributing to an open source project or have done? That's pretty good. It should be all of us though, right? Like, why aren't we all doing it? I mean, we obviously have like constraints around time, but a lot of the times we found is that, you know, I go to a project, I don't know where to make a difference. I don't know the guy I need to talk to, and like I don't know where to start and what's going to be really helpful. So as we started building the Brackets open source project, we wanted to try to lower those barriers as much as possible. So the first thing we did is we got the legal stuff out of the way. So Brackets is MIT licensed, which if you're not an open source license expert is to basically do whatever you want with license. If you want to package up brackets and call it schmackets, you're totally fine to do that. You can even sell it for some money. Maybe you could fix some bugs or two, or whatever. But legally, no problem. You could take brackets and put it into other applications as well. In fact, there's a few people who are already starting to do that. If I come back here really quick. Adobe does it, right? So we have something in the Creative Cloud called Edge Code. And Edge Code is our distribution of brackets where we add a bunch of extra features in there that are very, very specific to Adobe, like support for Edge web fonts, support for Edge Inspect, so integration with Adobe Cooler. Recently, we've got Intel who are now building a mobile SDK or a mobile development environment called the Intel XDK, which I think you might hear about if you go over to their booth. And again, its primary code editor is using brackets as well. So again, you can take this, you can do whatever you want with it. You might want to check out XDK. It's also free, so that's a good plus. But that's one of those big things, right? You don't want to get involved in a project if you're going to have all these legal limitations of where it can go and what you could do with it. Gone. We're also developing 100% in the open on GitHub. So we use GitHub issues. We use GitHub for our main source control. There's our source control or source repo. There's no other hidden repos. What you're seeing on GitHub is actually it. In fact, if I pull it up right now, there's probably a commit within the last hour. The team's constantly working there. But basically, it's everything there. You make a change to brackets, submit a pull request, it's going straight to it. Cool. So the other barrier that usually gets in the way of hacking on your editor is that it's usually written in something that you're not an expert in, right? So if you are working in Eclipse, you're going to have to go and learn Java and this big nasty Eclipse framework, and I don't recommend that. We've been there, done that. If you're in like Sublime, I think you can write them in Python. But the fact is we wrote brackets in JavaScript with HTML and CSS. The same things that you guys are experts in are the same things you would need to be an expert in making awesome stuff in brackets. And that's huge, right? The frameworks that you're using every day to build your other applications are the same frameworks that you could use today. The same tools that you're using are the same tools you could use here. In fact, brackets has the ability to point Chrome DevTools at itself. So you can actually use the Chrome DevTools to debug brackets and work on brackets. So that's a big deal, right? So anything that you're doing in HTML, you're pretty much, or JavaScript, you're pretty much already an expert and qualified to start hacking on brackets. It's pretty easy to get started, and we've done a couple things that make it easy to actually make a big impact while you're learning about what's going on. The first thing is we have what we call starter issues. So if you actually go out to our GitHub repo and look up at the issues, you'll find that there's actually a label called starter bugs. So starter bugs are these really small, bite-sized, usually low priority, but pretty simple to do, maybe within an hour or two type of work. That we think are really good for people just wanting to learn the code base, right? So if you're going to get in there and you want to figure out how everything sort of fits together before you start doing some real hacking, starter bugs will actually give you a purpose, right? It'll give you a mission. Go and figure out how to add support for Visual Basic. Someone wants that. Go ahead and ask for unit tests or how they should be expected and that whole 9 yards. But it gives you sort of a purpose. And so you're going to actually learn about this. Only going to take maybe an hour, maybe 2 at most. It's not going to be like a giant time commitment. But at the end, you'll make an impact on the project, but you'll also learn about how things are going. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, we also have starter features. So our entire backlog for everything that we're working on is on Trello in public. So you can always see what's going on right now. As you can see, we've got a darkness shell. I talked about some of the other stuff like the cubic Bezier editor. And this is actually what's in progress. This is all the stuff that's in our backlog. And we follow Scrum. I'll talk about that in a second. And we just work from the top down. So if you want to come in here and grab a feature, you're more than happy to. Just let us know so we make sure we're not working on it at the same time. But one of the things that we've done is if I go into the labels, we have the notion of starter features. So starter features are things that aren't really super high priority. They usually don't have a lot of UI involved, but there's something you could probably tackle a few nights in a week or maybe a little over the weekend. But these are much bigger than a starter bug, right? These are fundamentally you're adding a new feature to the project. And these are really great, especially if you're trying to get going, because you'll get to go through the process. You'll see how everything works. You'll see if the brackets team listens and gets your pull request in. You don't have to waste, go spend 40 hours working on this giant thing and then find out, oh, well, maybe it wasn't like that. Anyway. But you kind of get the idea. So we've got these ideas where you can sort of dive in. But the hope is that you've got your own crazy ideas. You're going to go and experiment. But if you want a place to get started, that's what these are here for. Another great place to help out is around translations. So if you're bilingual or trilingual or quadlingual or whatever the one after that is, we actually localize brackets to a whole bunch of different languages. So Adobe localizes brackets to 2 languages because we wanted it for Edge code. So we localize it to Japanese and French. But you can see brackets is supported in a whole bunch of other languages, and these are all community driven. So anytime we make an update to brackets, the community is usually right there to update all the strings and keep it there, which is kind of a big deal because this is a free open source code editor. So we're trying to remove the barriers for people to get into web development. So making sure that it's in their local language is a big deal to them. So it's another really easy place to contribute, and you don't even have to get your hands dirty writing code. You can just actually, know what you know, do what you know. If you are going to start working on Brackets core, we do have a few things that are in the Bracket stack. Hopefully nothing here is a big surprise. We use a little bit of Twitter Bootstrap. We're kind of deprecating as much as we can and moving to Topcoat. If you guys haven't heard of it, Topcoat wasn't around when we started. But as you see, there's not a lot of UI in Brackets, so there's not a lot of Bootstrap going on in there outside of like maybe a button here for our dialogues and stuff like that. Because of Bootstrap, we do use less. It makes Brackets really easy to theme. I can actually just change a couple variables, change the way Brackets look. So we kind of like that idea. jQuery, require.js is in there. We use Mustache for templating when we need it. The core code editor is built on another open source project called CodeMirror that we live downstream from. So a lot of the features that we add into Brackets, like inline editors, actually had to go into CodeMirror, and then we inherited from CodeMirror when it came back. We also have Node running as part of our native shell. So if you're building something in brackets and you want to tap into something that you found on NPM, or you want to tap into something that Node can do that the browser necessarily can't, you've got that power. And we also have a pretty advanced JavaScript code intelligence engine called Turn that's in there. And we actually do dynamically typed static analysis on your sort of code, and actually can do some pretty cool code stuff that I think most IDEs are actually struggling with these days. But the best way to like experiment with something and do is not actually to be in core. I mean, in fact, most of the time, 99% of the times you want to build something, it's probably going to be built as an extension. Most of the things that I showed you today, all those inline editors, even live development for HTML, we built as an extension, and it's just an extension we happen to ship by default with brackets. Extensions are super powerful. They're really modular. You can live in your own sort of little world, build an extension, use any framework you want, use any UI, preprocessors, whatever. And they can pretty much do anything. Unlike other code editors, you aren't constrained by just what the APIs that we gave you in brackets. If there's something you can't access directly in brackets, you have the entire DOM. You can just hack the DOM up. In fact, most of our extension APIs came from just us looking at extensions and saying, okay, this guy's really hacking something up, and so is he. Let's see if we can build an API to make this a little bit more standard. But there's really no limit to what extensions can do as far as logic and as well as UI as well. And that's a big difference. We have a extension registry built into brackets where you can basically search across all the different community extensions that are out there. I haven't checked in maybe a month or so, but I think there's about 100 extensions that are loaded and written by the community already. I think I've got a couple here loaded here. I've got every scrub, I've got Markdown. But if I go over to the available tab, you can actually see there's a ton of these extensions that the community has started building. So we've got ones that had like a Vim bar if you're coming from Vim. We've got ones that have code folding, some that actually gives you different themes for brackets, other ways to like change your keyboard shortcuts, all sorts of things. Oh yeah, this one's really cool. I'll install the SVG one. So we got this SVG one. When I just installed it, it was pretty quick. If I actually go and like preview SVG now, I think I have an SVG file somewhere around here. Brackets. Yeah, that's SVG. So it actually shows me the SVG code with this extension, but then it gives me that preview. I can actually bump this guy up a little. But all the things that brackets does really, really well, like let's see if I can find where that color is that I'll change. Let's go ahead with this. Boop. I can actually do this stuff to SVG as well. Actually, that was a random color to pick, but you kind of get the idea. And that's the power of an extension. This extension, I think, is about 110 lines of code. That's basically it, to do something somewhat powerful that most editors can't do. So yeah, so extensions are pretty awesome. I'm just going to leave it at that. And that's not what I wanted. So we built our development process around this open source project. Like we knew from day one we wanted this to be a big sandbox where everybody could get in. So one of the other barriers we wanted to drop was if you contribute something, it shouldn't take like years and years for it to make it into core and make it into the user's hands. So we follow an agile process. We're very kind of strict around Scrum, and we release about every 2.5 weeks. Comes out to 12 business days. Don't ask me why the core team picked 12 business days. It was just what worked. But the point is that every day we sit around in our daily, in our Scrum, and we basically review every pull request that's come in since the last day, and we do a check on it. So if you do write something, you submit it to the project, you're probably going to hear from us within 24 hours. Unless you submit it over the weekend, you might have to wait until Monday when we get back in the office. But the idea is that things aren't just going to go into a black hole. You're actually going to do some work. You're going to hear from us right away. Now, I didn't say we accept pull requests every single day, but we definitely review them, and we start working through the process of like making sure the unit tests are there, making sure it matches the feature that we're building, and you're going to hear from us right away. We try our best, and we're not always perfect, but we always try our best to take pull requests and make them the higher priority than even what's in our backlog. Mostly because we're trying to get brackets to a point where it's ready for day-to-day use, where anybody can use it as a replacement for their other code editors. And if you've gone and built a feature and you've submitted it, that's basically you saying, this is a big deal to me, I need this for day-to-day use. And so, of course, it falls on it. We try to prioritize it as fast as we can. So we've really sort of built our development process around being able to take your stuff in. To date, we have about 150 people who have contributed to brackets, which is we think is pretty good. I always like to put the little thing here that says they're actually outside of Adobe. What we found was a sort of a happy surprise was basically all these people internal to Adobe had nothing to do with the web organization or on complete other sides. Because it's an open source project, said, oh, I can start hacking on this. It's pretty easy. So we've got about I don't know if I last checked, maybe another 30 people just inside of Adobe who have hacked on brackets and added some features here and there. Some people here in this room. So the project's going fairly well. We're also here to help. So if you have ideas, you want to ask questions about what's on the roadmap, maybe you just want to bounce an idea off of like, hey, how would I go about starting and how would I go about doing this? The two best places to go are either the brackets channel on Freenode. The entire team hangs out there. Anybody who has op actually has commits. And so you'll find there's usually about 10 people in there who have actually commit rights to the repo. There's about another 50 people in there who are just hanging out and being cool. And then we also have the Google group, which is a great place to just ask questions, not as real time, but at least you've got a nice history there. I do say if you're going to grab anything off of our backlog and you really want to go and work on it, pop into one of these channels and just let us know. We just want to make sure that people aren't working at the same thing on the same thing at the same time. And so it's just good to let us know. And then we can also give you a little bit pointers and maybe help you out. So where's the project going? Right now we've been focusing a lot on less these really cool innovative features that I kind of showed you before and more about the boring stuff like creating a new document, saving documents, deleting documents, things that we kind of skipped over really quick. That's all in the product now, but that's kind of recent. So we're trying to get brackets to what we'll call a 1.0, and I really hate the term 1.0, but it really just means that there's enough features there that you're not saying, all right, I've got to go back to my other editor. Brackets is extremely stable. We've been using brackets to build brackets since Sprint 1. We're now on Sprint 33. So you don't have to worry about brackets crashing or losing any data. Because we're an iterative and agile process, it just means we're not going to have all the features that you'd expect right out of the box. We add them every couple of weeks. So we're going to get to 1.0, and I think we'll be there very, very, very soon. In fact, for most people, there's about 50,000 people already using brackets day to day. So there's a good bit of people who would probably argue with me that we're already at 1.0. The next thing that we want to work on is making brackets easier to embed into other applications. So this could mean brackets running by itself in the browser as sort of like a cloud-based editor, or this could mean brackets running inside of a larger application. Like maybe we use brackets as like this awesome HTML editor that's part of WordPress, or maybe we just put it into wiki mode and it can actually be shipped with like MediaWiki. But this idea that we want to make it easier for people to grab brackets and put it into other places and sort of help that sort of idea that it's not just about where brackets runs on the desktop and what we've been building, but it can go pretty much anywhere. So that's sort of the future, and that's the stuff that we're working on right now. I've got the obligatory links for all how to get involved, and this presentation's online. I've got a link at the end so you can get some of these links. But you know, as I mentioned, the project's on GitHub. We've got a lot of documentation on the wiki, especially for getting started on hacking brackets, how to set it up as a development environment, how to like run unit tests, all that good stuff. Our entire product backlog is out there. We've got the Google group, IRC, and of course, you should probably want to follow brackets on Twitter. We do release so often that it's just good to at least hear from us every once in a while when we're telling you, hey, here's 5 more features you're getting for free. And with that, I look forward to all of your contributions. And next time I come around and ask how many people contributed, at least one hand's going up, right? Okay. So that's brackets. I'm happy to answer any questions. And you could also help out by putting stickers on your laptop, letting people know that brackets is awesome. So I've got some stickers for you too. Cool.
When you were jumping in and out of your code, I mean, like you opened up CSS or JavaScript, and then you closed it, what was happening to that code? Was it saving it, or was it just?
So no. So yeah, actually, what will happen here is if I go in here, so you notice, I'll actually close my CSS file. So right now, nothing's really happening. But the second I make a change, you notice it'll get, well, you can't really see it, but it gets basically popped in to the editor up here the second a change gets made. So let me go ahead and save it real quick, make it go away. So I can actually go and view this, nothing's going on. The second I make an edit, you get a little dirty sign. The CSS thing will pop up. I can make the change. Now because I don't have to save it to push it to the browser, we don't actually save it. So I can actually go ahead and close this. It's still dirty. It still says, okay, there's been a change here, but it hasn't been saved. Now I can save it myself by just actually hitting Control S while I'm in here, and it'll actually go ahead and do that save. But we only save when you basically tell us to. And so it works almost just like you opened up the code, you wrote something and went back to work.
Does it only save the file that you're working in? So when you're in that little quick edit mode, it'll only save that CSS file and not the whole file around it?
Exactly. It only saves that specific file. And as you can kind of note, it's actually showing it's coming from the CSS. It's got the line number that it's coming from as well. So it's like it's just that little thing that your editor's in. Almost like if you had another document open.
Can you do a demo of debugging JavaScript with Theseus?
Yes, I can. I think I can. Let me see what project I have. True story. I run Windows and it bricks a lot, and I had to reinstall it, so I might not be set up for Theseus, but let's just go ahead and see what I can do. So Theseus is an experimental debugger that we've written that allows you to sort of debug in a little bit of a different way. It's kind of meant for trying to solve the problems that we have debugging asynchronous JavaScript, where different calls are being made at different times, and it doesn't necessarily work to just hit a breakpoint, right? What I want to do is be able to see where all the code is being executed. And so let me go ahead and install Theseus. And Theseus, we partnered with MIT. They want to get a whole bunch of information. I'm just going to go say no right now. And Theseus is, of course, open source as well. So let me go ahead and see if I actually have a project that'll work really well with Theseus. I think I do. Thank you for Dropbox, because even if I brick, I still get my Dropbox back. I think I've got, all right, Theseus demo. That looks promising. So let me go ahead. All right, Theseus is enabled. It is very experimental. Don't hold me to this if this doesn't work right here. So I'm going to go ahead and fire this guy up. Yeah, I know. Oop. And hopefully this guy's going to work. Okay, so I fired this guy up, and you'll notice that some things started happening in my editor right away. So over in the left-hand column, you'll notice that the initialization function has the number 1 right next to it. And it's basically saying, all right, this thing was called once, FYI. Now, if I go and change this and hit save, in real time, you'll actually see these call stacks starting to be updated. And this one's actually even delayed because we put it on a status just to show you that it's not actually just in a procedural order. It's actually when those functions are getting called back. So if I go back and I'll change this to like something else, all these sort of stacks start getting updated. Now the cool thing is that you basically go and just interact with your application, but you get to go back and say, okay, the second time this thing was being called, let's see actually what was happening there. And I start to get that sort of call stack that I was looking for. Like backtrace, oh, this is going to be back. Now the cool thing is I can also start to link these sort of things together. So if I hold Control in while I'm clicking on these guys, it actually starts to show me the different order that these are running in. So if I go and run this again, it starts to give me that stack. Now where things get really cool, and I don't know if this is going to work.
It's a little hard to see. Are you saying that it's showing that that first one was called in one turn of the game, and the other two were called in the next?
Exactly. So it's showing me right now the total call counts. Start running this again real quick just to throw some data in here. I'm throwing an error on purpose. So on the left-hand side here, and that is not what I wanted to blow up. So on the left-hand side here, it's giving me the number of times those things have been called as I've been interacting with the application. So I went and called the saved data, that came down here and made a couple other things. It actually calls this other one that's on a little bit of a timer delay. But if I want to see like the actual order, like, all right, when saved data was called, here's the 3 times. If I then say, okay, how many times was save called after that, it starts to actually interact with that. Now, I don't have it running because I'm not running the node side of this thing, but we can also do this across node in the same application. So we can debug client side and server side and then link the two together. So you can actually see, okay, when I called the save function, it made a call back to the server. If I flip back over to my server.js, it'll also show me that call and interact with it as well. And of course, then you can actually start to like debug all this sort of stuff and get that same sort of information you're used to. So like I can actually see here no, I can't blow this up, but it's the data that was passed back and forth, so I can really sort of understand it. So this is Theseus. It's one of those sort of random experiments we just started playing around with that was just really easy to do in brackets, and it would have been a lot of work to even just get the APIs and other editors to even try to do this sort of thing. And as you saw, I installed it in like 30 seconds and it goes away. Now Theseus does conflict a little with live development. It's kind of one of the other things. So you actually have to turn off Theseus if you want to get back to live development. And that's just because of how, we're basically a lot of communication going back and forth right now. So that's Theseus. Any other questions? Oh. I'll start here.
Is Adobe Edge, is it extendable too, or do you have to?
Yeah, so Adobe Edge is extendable, but Adobe's a little wary about pointing it to a big repo of craziness. In fact, short story, legal had this big scenario is someone's going to upload a virus, and they're going to install it, and then Adobe's going to go bankrupt. So So you can install extensions. It's just a manual process where brackets, we have that direct connection to the registry. But we actually have a blog post that if you want to go and enable the extension browser, it'll actually point to the registry. It's just one line fix, and it's more of just like, hey, you did it, we didn't do it type of thing. So Adobe's cool with that.
I was recently at the SaaS conference 2 weeks ago in New York, and the one thing I heard, like, people wanted to use this, but they were like, hey, we cannot use SaaS inside of this browser. And apparently they loved the evilness of this, or something, blah, blah, blah. It was done during alcohol, so.
Yeah, so SAS support, we've been really focused on those core languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but we're now kind of to the point where we're ready to start branching out into the sort of secondary languages, I'd call them. So SAS has been one of the things I've been focusing on, not because I think SAS is greater than these other ones, but it's pretty good. But it touches every part of our editor. So if we go and we implement SAS from doing the pre-processing, doing live development, doing code hinting, and doing all that sort of stuff, it'll also be a perfect blueprint for then anybody else to come by and say, let's plug in less, let's plug in stylist. SAS is a little bit tougher too because it's written in Ruby, and so we've got a little bit of an issue there, and we've been looking at some of the Node libraries to do some of that sort of stuff for us. Sorry.
The Node libraries.
So yeah, so we've been looking at the Node libraries, but yeah, so SAS is on our roadmap, but only because it's going to touch everything, and we might even be able to get into source maps, and so it'll be a really good example for the next language. Like even CoffeeScript and TypeScript could follow that sort of same pattern.
Yeah, I was curious when you were doing the stuff with the SVG preview, it did not appear on the right side, but up in the above.
That was just a choice of the extension developer. We have a few extensions that actually do that. Rather than pushing things out to the browser, they do them internally, so like the Markdown editor. But it's really just up to the extension editor how they want to do it. And so yeah, so there's no like sort of like constraints that always has to go out to the browser.